Well, submarines have been the hot topic for weeks now, and no one knows more about them than my next guest. Richard Spencer was the United States Secretary of the Navy, serving in that distinguished role from 2017 until 2019. He's currently in Australia in his role as Global Chair of investment and advisory firm Bondi Partners. And he joins me live now from Canberra. Great to have you with us, Secretary. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Not at all. Great to see you, Sharri.
Now, let's start with the AUKUS. Great to see you as well. Let's start with the AUKUS submarine deal. As you know, Australia will spend up to $370 billion over the next 30 years, first by purchasing 3 to 5 midlife US Virginia-class subs from the US. They expected, some of them anyway, to hit the water early next decade. Secretary, you've listened to some of the remarks on this from our former Prime Minister Paul Keating last week. What did you think of his criticisms of this deal?
Well, I'll tell you what, Sharri, I agree with the Prime Minister on one point that he made, and only one point, and that's that China will not do an amphibious landing on Australia. Otherwise, I pretty much disagreed with the majority of what he had to say. The fact remains that the beautiful reason of AUKUS is to have Australia, our deepest and longest running ally, alongside us in its own sovereign right, patrolling the waters of the Indo-Pacific for free trade and security. It made a great deal of sense, the whole AUKUS transaction in that regard.
Look, he claimed that the submarines are discoverable from space because they're so large, and he also said that it's just not a good deal. He said, why would it cost $376 billion to build just a handful of nuclear-powered submarines? Is this true? You are the expert. Is this true that they're visible from space and that this deal is costing Australia too much?
First of all, I know nothing about them being visible from space. When we look at our defense posture, one of the greatest things about underwater vehicles is their ability to be stealthy. I do want to be very wide-eyed and frank about the cost of a nuclear enterprise. It is very, very expensive. But let's think about what trickles down or trickles out from the investment in AUKUS. The reason I get tremendously excited about AUKUS is, one, we're working side by side with Australia. We start knocking down the speed bumps for the exchange of technology and the exchange of productivity. Specifically, I'm talking about ITAR. In the last 3 days, I've been over here talking to people who have technologies that we are in desperate need of for national security. I would love to get those into the U.S., and I would love to share with Australia some of our technologies.
Yeah. Just before we move off Paul Keating, Secretary, Mr. Keating said that Joe Biden, the US president, could barely string 3 sentences together. He criticised him for being incoherent. What's your opinion of Keating's own delivery?
I'm going to be polite and stately and say leave something to be desired.
Yeah, fair enough. Much more polite than Paul Keating was. Now, Donald Trump, your former boss, he's been in the news the past 2 days. He claims he's going to be arrested on Tuesday. Do you think he actually will be arrested? And how worried are you about protests that could flow on from this, seeing as he did seem to encourage protests in his social media post?
Yeah, that plays into the former president's playbook. Look, I'm not a lawyer, but as I said earlier today at the press club, much like Will Rogers said, all I know is what I read in the papers, and that's my alibi. I certainly hope that if, in fact, charges are brought against anyone, that our attorney generals and state attorney generals have all the facts and figures ready to exploit them. It sounds like a very interesting case, to be very frank with you.
Do you think Trump will get back into the White House? Should he avoid jail term?
It's a great question. The one thing I can comment on about American politics is you never really know how it turns out until it turns out.
No, fair enough. And it's worth also pointing out to viewers who might not know your history that you ended up having a falling out with the former president, which is why you left your role.
Exactly.
Now, you also had a distinguished career on Wall Street. What's your view on the crisis in financial institutions? Are you worried about a GFC-style contagion, seeing as we've now seen Credit Suisse and also Silicon Valley Bank had to have some sort of bailout, if not a technical bailout, but some sort of, guarantee of government deposits in order to make sure that people didn't lose their money in the case of Silicon Valley Bank, and a buyout in the case of Credit Suisse?
Yeah, Sharri, I am not concerned about a GFC. We had very rapid rate increase by the Fed, and we have to make sure we take into account second and third orders of effect, which I think were the impacts that you saw specifically in Silicon Valley Bank, which had a duration or risk mismanagement in their portfolio. In the Credit Suisse situation, again, you had rates going against them. I applaud the Fed in the case of the Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, the Fed's quick reaction and to provide a window for other banks to bring government securities that might have been underwater and then trade them out at par. Again, all these actions are shoring any sort of weakness up, but at the end of the day, as we all well know, it's faith that in the banking system that keeps it going. I don't think you're going to see an erosion of that in the immediate future, nor in the intermediate future. I think we're okay.
So you're not worried about other institutions facing similar problems or requiring a bailout globally?
I don't think a bailout, but I think we have tools shy of bailouts, such as the prime window, as they called it, for the ability for banks to manage assets in the rate environment that we're having right now.
Just finally, Secretary, I'd love to ask you about Russia's war in Ukraine. The ICC has issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin over war crimes in Ukraine. Joe Biden says the arrest warrant is justified. What's your assessment? And how does this all end? How do we actually see an end to the situation in Ukraine?
Sharri, it's a very troubling question because there's no immediate answer as far as I'm concerned and what I've read that comes to mind. The warrant by the ICC the arrest warrant is, I think, totally validable and it should be pursued. As far as the global stress and threats go, I'm very worried about President Xi's meeting over in Moscow. We're learning some troubling information that China has been supporting Moscow when it comes to armaments. That is a key worry as far as I'm concerned. Where it all ends, I wish I had some sort of silver lining answer. I don't.
All right. Richard Spencer, former United States Secretary of the Navy, I'm so grateful for your time, this exclusive sit-down chat while you're in Australia, and enjoy the rest of your trip.